How can I survive in the emperor's harem? Competing for favor and power? Thanks, but I'd rather just lie low. But to be honest, the emperor's wives are quite charming. It was a dark and windy night. By the small pond in the imperial garden, I heard a splash and clutched my forehead as stars spun around my head.
Alice, how dare you harm my lady?
Leaning against a rock, I tried to digest the strange yet familiar memories that had just flooded my mind. Yes, as a 996 corporate slave, I had finally gotten a break. I should have been lounging at home, but instead, I had somehow traveled through time. No, to be precise, I had transmigrated into a palace intrigue novel called Mad for the Palace, and tragically, I had become a genuine villainess. Mad for the Palace was a novel that had once taken the internet by storm, not because it was well written, but because of its chaotic hierarchy and absurd plot twists. Of course, the female characters were written to be incredibly alluring, but the emperor used them thoroughly to consolidate his power. Once they lost their value, he banished them to the cold palace to live out their days in loneliness. It wasn't until the heroine entered the palace that the male lead showed a hint of humanity. Even then, it wasn't clear that he truly loved her. So yes, the male lead was truly despicable. I sighed, watching the maid berate the helpless beauty on the ground. I couldn't help but feel a poetic urge. The sky is vast, the fields are wide, whose lovely wife guards an empty room. If you need help, I'm here, I live next door, my name is Wang. Tears of laughter streamed down my face. Wait a minute. Why does this scene feel so familiar? If I remember correctly, the maid, acting on her own, had ordered the heroine to be drowned to avenge the original character. At the critical moment, Alexander arrived, and to show his protective nature, he had the villainess and the maid executed. When I first read this, I wanted to complain. After all, the original character was a consort. Just for punishing the heroine, the emperor had her killed? What happened to the bond of marriage? Emperor, you have no heart. But now wasn't the time to complain about the emperor. I had just arrived and was already facing death. This couldn't be tolerated. After all, as a transmigrator, I should be treated like a leading lady in other stories, not a disposable character. Thinking this, my maid was diligently playing the role of a brainless minion, completely disregarding me, her mistress. Such audacity.
Today, my lady will teach you a lesson. Someone drown them both.
As the maid finished her line, I could hear footsteps approaching. Oh no, this must be the emperor.
Lady, it's all my fault for dragging you into this.
The maid beside Alice had red-rimmed eyes and clutched Alice's hand tightly. Ah, the lilies of my homeland are blooming again.
As long as I'm here, nothing will happen to you.
Alice squinted her eyes and looked coldly in my direction. She shielded her maid behind her.
Lady.
What a touching display of loyalty.
Look at her maid, a perfect helper, and then look at mine, a complete liability. The difference is heartbreaking. Alice glanced at us timidly, and I suddenly felt like a scoundrel. How could I be so cruel to such a delicate and beautiful flower? No wonder the emperor was so deeply in love with Alice. Who wouldn't love such a sweet, delicate beauty? Seeing the situation getting worse, my maid signaled the others to throw Alice into the pond. This was definitely speeding up my demise.
Stop! Ignoring my dizziness, I stepped forward and pulled the people holding Alice away. Turning around, I commanded Alice with authority, I'm not dead yet, so you can't die.
Oh.
My maid seemed to think I had lost my mind, unable to distinguish friend from foe.
Consort, it was Alice who hit you. Look at your swollen forehead. Leave this to me. I'll make sure they disappear without a trace. What are you waiting for? Take the consort back to the palace.
When I use this question mark, it's not that I have a problem, but that I think you have a problem. She glanced at Alice and her maid.
Drown them.
Such audacity! With this kind of spirit, being my maid is really beneath you. Seeing Alexander's people approaching, the maid continued to give orders.
Slap!
A loud slap echoed. Everyone stopped and looked at us. I clutched my stinging right hand, tears welling up in my eyes. Miscalculation. Force is mutual. I should have let someone else do the hitting.
How dare you all disrespect me? Have I fallen so low that a maid can give orders?
Alexander had silently appeared nearby, watching the scene with a cold gaze. Under the moonlight, his handsome face looked otherworldly, his sword-like brows furrowed, and his deep eyes filled with contemplation. Even if Alexander hadn't appeared, I could feel his dominating presence.
Consort, did you hit the wrong person? I'm your maid.
Blowing on my stinging palm, I coldly replied.
What a disloyal maid. I hit you on purpose.
Consort, I was just following your...
Silence!
This maid must have been bribed. Otherwise, why would she be so eager to harm me? Even though Alexander hadn't approached, I could feel his malicious gaze. Ah, I'm doomed.
Serious, guards, take Emily away and keep her under strict watch.
After dealing with Emily, Sophia turned and glanced at Alice. She walked over gracefully, using the catwalk she had practiced in private.
Softly, Lily, are you all right?
The moment Alice's delicate hand touched Sophia's, she felt a surge of excitement. To avoid revealing her true nature, she quickly changed the subject.
Cheerful, it's my maid's fault for scaring you, Lily.
Alice looked like a delicate flower, evoking a protective instinct.
Coldly, a misunderstanding?
Earnestly, yes, a misunderstanding. Lily, you saw how arrogant that maid was. She almost dragged me away.
Sophia put on a pitiful expression, lamenting her poor choice of servants.
Friendly, if you feel wronged and want to punish her, I won't object.
Alice stiffened, not understanding why Sophia was suddenly being so kind. She bit her lip, her face turning red.
Shy, I'm fine.
Relieved, Lily, finally found you.
Several guards approached, followed by a man. Sophia gasped at his stunning looks.
Excited, well. No wonder the emperor could secure his position as the male lead. His looks are truly captivating.
The emperor, Alexander, stood there with an aura that made people want to kneel. The original character had loved him despite his harsh treatment.
Serious, Sophia, what are you and Lily doing here?
Sophia inwardly gasped as the emperor questioned her.
Innocent, Henry, look at the moon tonight. It's so round. Lily and I were just taking a walk under the moonlight, watching the stars.
Sophia leaned on Alice, secretly wrapping her right arm around her waist.
Startled, oh.
Alice, startled by Sophia's actions, looked at her with red-rimmed eyes, then quickly lowered her head, blushing to her ears.
Angry, Sophia, what are you doing?
Friendly, well, Lily felt a bit dizzy while we were walking, so I helped her.
Suspicious, is that so?
Alexander's gaze lingered on Sophia's face. Alice, with her head down, seemed unsure whether to be angry or suspicious of Sophia's intentions. Sophia could feel the emperor's gaze piercing through her.
Hopeful, come on, I just held your beauty for a moment. Is it necessary to be so petty? Henry, I think Lily must be very tired. It's late, shouldn't we?
I blinked innocently at Alexander.
Whom?
Although he didn't like Samantha, he had never seen her speak to anyone before. But tonight, she was strolling under the moonlight and stargazing. Was this a sudden change of heart or a deliberate act? Facing Alexander's scrutiny, I was incredibly anxious. What was going on with these two? One remained silent, while the other gave me a sinister smile. Didn't they know my fragile heart couldn't take this?
Thank you, Sophia, for inviting me tonight.
In that moment, I felt light as a feather. The protagonist smiled at me. What does it mean to have a smile that captivates all? The beauty of the Six Palaces pales in comparison. When the original book used all sorts of flowery language to describe the protagonist, I thought the author was overdoing it. But facing such a protagonist in person, I felt the author's descriptions were insufficient. Unfortunately, my lack of eloquence left me with only one exclamation: wow.
Henry, if you have no other matters, Lily and I will take our leave.
Alexander was indeed very handsome, but he seemed blind. With a protagonist as beautiful as a white lotus beside him, he kept staring at me. Was he out of his mind? I knew I looked decent, but with a new love interest beside him, wasn't he afraid of making her jealous by staring at his old flame? Scumbag. As I complained internally, I remembered a part of the plot where Alexander and the protagonist were in a cold war. Because of this, the protagonist had thoughts of leaving the palace, but the original character intercepted her, leading to the current situation. Whenever the male lead and the protagonist argued, the cannon fodder was doomed. Darn it, why am I so unlucky?
Wait. Did I say you could leave?
Alexander's deep voice came from behind. While others might find his magnetic voice enjoyable, to me, it felt like a death sentence. Would these two ever reconcile?
Henry, what else do you need?
The entire imperial garden fell into an eerie silence. Everyone, including the male and female leads, the maids, and the eunuchs, stared at me in disbelief. They probably never expected me to speak to the emperor in such a bold manner.
Since my beloved consort took Lily out for a walk, I should reward you. You already have plenty of gold and jewels, so how about?
Alexander didn't approach Alice, but instead moved closer to me. My heart skipped a beat. What was he planning? Scumbag Emperor, I warn you, don't cause trouble. If you do, don't blame me for retaliating.
Henry, there's no need. Lily looks a bit unwell, probably from the cold. How about?
That won't do. Since you protected Lily, how about I reward you with a night in my chambers?
I felt like spitting blood. I was too exhausted to complain. Alexander was such a pig-headed fool. Didn't he realize he was losing the protagonist? Seeing Alice's pale face and her biting her lip, I felt a pang of sympathy. Indeed, Alexander, you have no heart.
Someone, escort Eleanor back to her palace.
Lily. Don't go.
Internally, I was desperately reaching out. Wah, the soft and fragrant beauty was gone, and now I had to face the scumbag emperor. Heaven, strike me with lightning and send me back. I'd rather be a corporate slave. I love work, work makes me happy. Boom, a thunderclap echoed in the sky, and I jumped in fright, then shrank into the scumbag emperor's arms. Heavens, I take it back. My dear, I never knew you loved me so much. Quickly, I pressed my finger to the emperor's lips, knowing nothing good ever came out of his mouth. I looked up at the sky at a 30-degree angle, then hugged Alexander's neck tightly, crying to myself. If I weren't outnumbered, I'd love to throw this big jerk into a pond.
My dear, it's time to return to the palace.
Then, I was lifted into a princess carry by the big jerk. Was he serious? Wasn't he just saying that to annoy the heroine? I felt both anxious and expectant at the same time. What was I expecting? It's just spending the night together. Haven't I seen enough to know what happens? To avoid Alexander noticing anything, I racked my brain for memories of our interactions and found an excuse to walk on my own. Being carried was comfortable, but being carried by the emperor made me fear for my life. All the way, I kept sneaking glances at Alexander, my heart pounding with anxiety. Historically, the male lead belongs to the heroine, and any woman involved with him meets a grim fate. I'm doomed.
Lady Sophia, we've arrived at your chambers.
Seeing me still walking forward as if I didn't know where I lived, Alexander's lips curled up, his eyes filled with amusement. Today's Samantha seemed different from what he remembered. His words jolted me, and I quickly turned and rushed into my chambers.
Henry, are you really going to stay here tonight?
I glanced at Alexander, remembering that in the story, he hated the original character's pretense. I had to take a gamble. I lowered my head, pretending to be shy and expectant, and looked at Alexander.
Henry, if you stay here, Lily will be jealous. I just saw that Lily was in a bad mood. Shouldn't you go comfort her?
My words almost made me cringe, but it seemed the emperor was somewhat pleased. Indeed, men love delicate flowers and sweet talkers. I miscalculated. Seeing Samantha's sudden shyness, Alexander found her unexpectedly pleasing. This woman seemed to love him quite a bit.
I don't think Lily will be jealous. It's you who are jealous, isn't it, Sophia?
Jealous? I inwardly scoffed. I just wanted Alexander to leave as soon as possible.
Henry.
I almost gagged on my own words. Although Alexander was devastatingly handsome and hit all my weak spots, his emperor status made me content with just admiring him from afar. Alexander frowned slightly, clearly disgusted by my act. His eyes narrowed, a cold light flashing in them. He grabbed my chin, pulling me close. I struggled slightly, just for show, and then resolutely moved my lips towards his.
Sophia, what do you think of Lily?
Alexander's sudden question caught me off guard. When it comes to the heroine, I had to praise her to the skies.
Lily is noble and virtuous. I believe she should be made empress. Henry, since you value Lily so much, why not make her empress tomorrow?
I remembered that the heroine eventually became empress, and Alexander, to show his deep affection, dismissed the entire harem for her. Wouldn't that mean I could leave gracefully? It's just a pity that the delicate flower of the heroine would end up with the emperor. Alexander's lips curled into a mocking smile as he looked at me, his expression a mix of ridicule, indifference, and nonchalance.
Becoming empress?
I nodded, my mind racing with thoughts of what might happen next.
Your Majesty, I just remembered that today is an inconvenient time for me, and I have eaten something too heavy. I fear I won't be able to serve you properly.
Alexander could easily see through my excuses.
What a pity.
He suddenly released me.
Your Majesty, when will Lily's coronation ceremony be held?
Finally able to breathe as Alexander moved away from me.
That's not for you to worry about. You should know how to behave at Catherine's birthday celebration tomorrow.
This woman was Catherine's favorite. If it weren't for the birthday banquet.
You should know how to behave at Catherine's birthday celebration tomorrow.
Alexander stood up to leave, his eyes flashing with coldness as he seemed to remember something.
Phew. He's finally gone.
As soon as Alexander left, the air felt fresher.
Wait.
My smile froze. If I remembered correctly, this birthday banquet was also a turning point for the main characters. Alice would suggest expanding Alexander's harem at the banquet, which would displease him. After Catherine left, many would suffer. I had felt a bit of sympathy for those who suffered, but now it was my turn. The next morning, while getting ready.
Your Grace, did you not sleep well last night? You look so pale.
The maid said, placing breakfast on the table with a look of surprise.
Is it because of Emily? Even if it was just for show, you didn't have to send her to the dungeon.
Grace shivered at the thought.
I've heard that the dungeon is a terrible place, full of filth. When will you let Emily out?
Why should I? She dared to defy me. Sending her to the dungeon is too lenient.
I looked at myself in the mirror, noting the beauty of this body, with a tear mole adding a touch of allure. I admired myself, feeling almost overwhelmed by my own beauty.
Your Grace, it's time to change.
Grace said, placing some vibrant clothes beside me.
Change them.
One look and I knew they were inappropriate. Today was Catherine's birthday, and with the main character present, dressing like this would only invite trouble. I didn't want to become an innocent victim.
Huh?
Seeing me choose a more subdued dress, Grace was stunned. In the past, I dressed flamboyantly, beautiful but aggressive. Today, my simple attire made me look especially gentle. This birthday celebration was a major event, particularly focusing on the emperor's harem. I had been excited to see it in person. Entering the palace, I saw the emperor sitting in the center, with the elegant Margaret beside him, still well preserved despite her age. Around her were many beautifully dressed concubines. I couldn't take my eyes off them.
Ah. The gentle and kind Isabella, with her slender waist and proud chest, was simply too stimulating.
I wiped away imaginary drool and reluctantly looked away. Next to Samantha, the seemingly refined Charlotte walked gracefully, her willow-like waist swaying.
Your Majesty, Catherine, we are late.
Charlotte's unique accent and innocent appearance created an adorable contrast. A group of beautifully dressed ladies sat in the back, each more charming than the last.
I swallowed hard, finally understanding the emperor's allure. Alexander had showered all his love on the main character, neglecting these beauties. How could he be so heartless?
I couldn't help but glance at Alexander, who exuded a commanding presence. Sensing my gaze, Alexander frowned, his eyes lingering on me for a few seconds.
This woman.
As the daughter of the Prime Minister, with Catherine and the Prime Minister's support, she wouldn't have ended up like this if not for the main character. But who could she blame? I sighed softly, catching Catherine's attention, who looked at me with mild surprise.
Samantha, why are you dressed so plainly today?
It's your birthday. How could I steal your spotlight?
Catherine was amused, nodding in approval. As I took my seat, many concubines looked at me curiously. Normally, the original Samantha would have acted haughty, but I didn't want to. With so many concubines, I couldn't bear to disturb them. I smiled at Charlotte, Isabella, Victoria, and the other ladies.
Oh my, has the concubine changed?
I was speechless. I wasn't unattractive, so why were they so surprised? The banquet was about to start, but the main character was still absent.
Your Majesty, is Lily not here because she doesn't respect Catherine?
This sparked a chorus of agreement.
Exactly, it's Catherine's birthday, and all the other ladies are here. Lily must be doing this on purpose.
The emperor held his wine cup, not stopping them, his eyes fixed on the entrance. I poured myself some tea, just as a figure hurried in.
No wonder she's the main character. She appeared with a halo, as if accompanied by background music, like a fairy descending from the heavens.
Alice appeared, drawing everyone's attention.
Lily is late. Please forgive me, Your Majesty, Your Highness.
Many noblewomen snorted, their faces showing envy and jealousy.
Come to my side.
His tightly furrowed brows relaxed slightly at the sight of Alice. Ignoring everyone else's feelings, he had Alice sit closest to him. Everyone knew that the position closest to the emperor, besides the empress dowager, was reserved for the empress or the highest-ranking consort. Alexander's sudden decision to have Alice sit beside him was a clear affront to me, the consort. Alice hesitated, feeling the hostile stares from the others and the stern gaze of the empress dowager. In this tense atmosphere, I stood up voluntarily. This was a rare opportunity to make a good impression. Whoever wanted that close position could have it, I didn't care.
Consort, do you have any objections?
Alexander's eyes narrowed as he watched me, as if daring me to defy everyone's expectations.
Your Majesty, Alice is merely a noblewoman. Isn't it inappropriate for her to sit there?
She had intended that seat for Samantha, not for a mere noblewoman. Unexpectedly, I walked over to Alice and smiled warmly.
Your Majesty, Your Highness, I believe this seat is perfect for Alice. I've heard that Alice and the Emperor share a deep bond, and she even saved his life. She personally selected a rare ginseng for the Empress Dowager's birthday, which is why she was late.
I affectionately took Alice's hand.
Your Highness, please don't blame her.
Everyone was taken aback by my actions, including Alice. What was going on? The usually arrogant and willful consort was speaking up for Alice and even giving up her seat? Had the world turned upside down? Seeing the rare ginseng brought by the maid, the Empress Dowager's expression softened considerably. She lowered her head, thinking that perhaps the consort wasn't as heartless as the rumors suggested.
Your Grace, I am unworthy of this seat.
I wouldn't give her the chance to decline. The previous seat was closest to that troublesome man and farthest from the other beauties, but Alice's new seat was different. That seat was right in the center of the concubines, surrounded by women as beautiful as fairies. I was more than happy to take it. Besides, I had no desire to become collateral damage in the main couple's Cold War. I sat in Alice's former seat, feeling quite comfortable. Finally, I was away from that troublesome man. Alice was moved by Samantha's gesture. The consort was willing to give up her seat for her, even though she had never done anything to please the consort. Alexander's interest had waned. He frowned slightly, his deep eyes showing a hint of curiosity. Today, the consort and Alice's relationship seemed unusually close. Samantha's decisive and swift actions made him suspect that she was avoiding him. Damn it! Samantha sat in the center of the beauties, too busy to care about what the main couple was doing.
Isabella, your waist is so slender. You must take good care of yourself.
I smiled, admiring Isabella's hourglass figure. Even though I wasn't lacking, I couldn't help but feel envious. These women were so beautiful that even I, as a woman, was moved. Yet that troublesome man remained oblivious. Alexander's brows furrowed again. He looked up, trying to find the source of the gaze, but to no avail.
Blushed at Samantha's compliment, hiding her face behind a fan, looking so shy that one couldn't help but want to kiss her.
How adorable!
I exclaimed softly, unable to resist the allure of beauty, wanting to get closer. With so many beauties around and Alice by his side, Alexander wouldn't notice me. I glanced at Alexander, seeing him holding Alice's hand tightly, a storm brewing in his eyes.
Consort, it seems Alice has upset the Emperor. Should we?
I shrugged. I wasn't about to get involved in such unfortunate matters.
After a moment's thought, I seriously advised the noblewoman.
Why should women make things difficult for each other? I pinched her cheek, enjoying the smooth texture. We have a long future ahead. We might even have tea together someday.
Sophia decided to keep quiet for now and listen obediently, planning to settle accounts later.
Look at how delightful Henry and our dear Lily look together. You should learn from them. This is what marital harmony looks like.
Her straightforwardness left everyone wide-eyed and blushing.
Sophia, you know so much.
Of course. I've seen countless films in the modern world.
She leaned in and mischievously grabbed Eleanor's chin.
I'll teach you some tricks when I have time. Sophia, don't forget.
Sophia's eyes sparkled with excitement.
Don't worry, I won't forget.
She turned to Isabella, admiring her ample bosom and slender waist.
Isabella, may I touch your slender waist?
Sophia, this might not be appropriate.
Sophia sighed, disappointed.
Charlotte, your outfit today is truly impressive. And Victoria, you are simply outstanding.
She smiled and complimented all the ladies present, leaving no one out.
Sophia, you flatter us. About those tips you mentioned, could you perhaps?
Of course. Charlotte, you'll be the first I tell. Sophia, you promised I would be first.
Who said that? I'm first.
The ladies began to argue, and Sophia nodded.
Don't worry, everyone will get a turn.
Alexander, watching from afar, tightened his grip on his cup, his face darkening.
Catherine, I told you Sophia has her own plans.
Yes, I see.
Sophia was so immersed in the moment that she didn't notice the attention she was attracting.
Sophia, come here.
Startled, Sophia glanced at Alice.
Henry?
The beauties around her also turned to look at Alexander.
Come to my side.
Sophia almost spat out her tea.
Henry, there's no room beside you.
There's room here.
Was Alexander so affected by the Cold War with the heroine that he lost his mind?
Henry, this isn't appropriate.
Sophia, go for it. We're rooting for you.
The Emperor letting Sophia sit beside him confirmed to the ladies that Sophia had hidden talents.
Sophia, hurry up. We're watching you.
Sophia almost slipped.
Are you defying me?
His cold aura seemed to freeze the air.
Henry, I'll sit beside Lily.
She moved close to Alice, but Alexander tapped the table lightly.
Who told you to go there? Come to my side.
Was this man out of his mind? She had to sit close to Alexander. She looked back at the other ladies, hoping they would try to win his favor, but they all looked at her eagerly.
Wow, Sophia was right. This is like hands-on teaching.
Sophia is too good to us.
Sophia wanted to cry. This was what it meant to shoot oneself in the foot.
Henry, I dare not.
Unbeknownst to her, Alexander had been watching her every move. He smirked, his eyes filled with amusement. This woman had changed and seemed quite afraid of him. Interesting. After much contemplation, I decided to cling to the heroine's side, moving closer to her. No matter what, I wouldn't go near Alexander today, let alone sit beside him.
Lily, the weather outside is nice. How about accompanying me for a walk?
Alice, thinking of a way to leave, saw me as her savior upon hearing my suggestion.
Henry, may I accompany Sophia outside?
Hand in hand, Alice and I left, creating a harmonious scene. Alexander's hand, holding a wine cup, paused midair. What was wrong with these two today? They seemed to inexplicably disdain him. Seeing Samantha and Alice suddenly leave, the other consorts felt the fun was over and waved their sleeves in disappointment.
Sophia, you're so modest. I thought we could witness it firsthand.
Exactly, I've been looking forward to it for so long.
Once outside the palace, I finally breathed a sigh of relief, glad to have left that dreadful place.
Sophia.
As we walked to the imperial garden, Alice suddenly stopped, her tones strangely distant.
Lily, what's wrong?
Seeing Alice suddenly silent, I instinctively took a step back, sensing an impending confrontation. Realizing this, I felt uneasy. Alice bit her lip, staring at me intently.
Sophia, why are you helping me?
Alice was equally puzzled by Samantha's continuous help. The Sophia before her was entirely different from the one she had known. Just last night, she had the chance to expose Alice in front of Alexander and even had the opportunity to have her subordinates harm Alice, but she didn't.
No reason. I didn't understand you well enough before, that was my mistake.
Alice was taken aback by my response.
Sophia, don't say that. I was also at fault before.
Careful.
Seeing Alice about to fall, I quickly held her, protecting her behind me, but ended up hurting my waist on a rock, breaking out in a cold sweat from the pain.
Sophia, you're hurt.
Alice was anxious, her eyes turning red. If it weren't for her, Sophia wouldn't have been injured.
I'm fine. Seeing Alice's red eyes, my heart melted. Her tears made her look so pitiful. However, this matter wasn't simple, someone had tried to harm Alice.
Come out!
My eyes turned cold, hating those who schemed behind the scenes. Several consorts slowly emerged from behind the rock. Their status was higher than Alice's, and they didn't expect Sophia to defend her.
Come here. Apologize to Lily.
What?
Alice bit her lip, not realizing my actions had made her reconsider leaving the palace.
Didn't you hear me?
My words carried an undeniable authority, revealing my noble upbringing, unlike those from humble backgrounds. The consorts, not expecting Sophia to stand up for Alice, were taken aback but eventually submitted to the power dynamics.
Please forgive us, Lily. We didn't mean to.
The consorts approached, slightly bowing, their eyes lowered. From my perspective, they still had some grace, but their actions were despicable. I didn't tell them to rise, instead linking arms with Alice.
Lily, how should we deal with them?
What?
Unexpectedly, we both turned to look at each other simultaneously, a scent of crabapple flowers wafting to my nose. My inner self was screaming, Alice smells so good. But alas, she was someone who could indirectly affect my life and death. I had to resist the temptation. I steadied myself, turning to the consorts still kneeling. Seeing their trembling figures, I felt a bit of pity. Samantha, Samantha, you must choose your targets wisely. These women are not to be trifled with.
Sophia, we know we were wrong.
The bolder ones looked up, pleading.
Lily, their perfume is too strong. How about we punish them by making them copy Buddhist scriptures 100 times? What do you think?
Of course, that's fine. Although Alice didn't understand why Samantha was treating her this way, she couldn't refuse her now, especially after Samantha had been injured saving her.
Samantha, being a consort, was of higher rank than Alice. She knew she had no right to object. Moreover, Samantha had just been hurt saving her. How could she not go along with her?
Did you hear that? Go back and each copy the Buddhist scriptures 100 times and deliver them to Lily.
I sneered. They had tried to harm Alice, and although they failed, I was the one who got hurt. Copying scriptures 100 times was a light punishment. Alexander, watching from behind the rock, took in the entire scene. He had just come out for some fresh air and unexpectedly witnessed this drama. His beloved consort looked at Alice with such eagerness, her face even more charming with a blush. If he didn't know better, he might think she was infatuated with Alice. Infatuated? Alexander felt a sting in his heart. So, she claimed to love him but turned around and showered affection on the beauties in his harem. He hadn't realized his consort had such inclinations. Narrator, tone, unsettled. Alexander felt deeply unsettled. Narrator, tone, relieved, but I didn't feel anything at all. Seeing those other ladies hastily leave, I finally felt a sense of relief.
Samantha, tone, friendly, don't be afraid. If anyone in the palace bullies you again, just send someone to me, and I'll back you up.
Narrator, tone, friendly. Samantha gave her a wink once the other ladies were out of sight.
Alice, tone, wary, is that really okay?
Narrator, tone, cheerful. Alice felt a bit wary, knowing Samantha meant well. But why?
Samantha, tone, cheerful, come on, we're all in the palace together. We should be like sisters. What's the harm?
Alexander, tone, angry.
Narrator, tone, serious. Hearing Samantha's words about being like sisters, Alexander couldn't hold back any longer and let out a low grunt. He turned away from behind the rockery, preparing to leave. Narrator, tone, serious. He had thought Samantha's behavior had been a bit unusual these past few days. But it turned out she still had ulterior motives. In the palace, he treated all the concubines with indifference, except for Alice, who was somewhat special. Just at Catherine's birthday banquet, she had mingled with the other concubines, and now she was getting close to Alice. Wasn't this a ploy to secure a higher position?
Samantha, tone, cheerful. So, if you have any difficulties in the future, just send a maid or eunuch to my palace to talk to me.
Narrator, tone, serious. Samantha was unaware of the misunderstanding Alexander had developed. Since coming here, she had figured it out. Instead of trying to win over the unpredictable emperor, it was better to get along well with Alice. After all, Alice was destined to become the queen. If they had a good relationship, Samantha could find a way to escape the palace. But all this depended on staying alive. Narrator, tone, thoughtful. Alice seemed lost in thought, not sure what she was thinking.
Alice, tone, cheerful. Sophia treats me so.
Narrator, tone, surprised, but before she could finish, she froze. What did she see? Narrator, tone, serious. In the side corridor, a man in bright yellow robes was walking from east to west, followed by attendants who didn't look like mere servants. The distance and the dozens of orchids in between made it hard for Alice to see clearly. So, was it Alexander? Narrator, tone, serious. A gust of wind snapped Alice back to reality. She instantly realized that anyone wearing bright yellow in the palace had to be the emperor.
Alice, tone, worried the emperor just passed by, and we didn't pay our respects.
Samantha, tone, cheerful, oh, he passed by. He didn't come right up to us. Should we have run over to pay our respects? No need for that.
Narrator, tone, cheerful, so that's what it was about?
Samantha, tone, cheerful, I have some ointment for bruises in my palace. How about coming with me?
Alice, tone, hesitant, is that really okay?
Narrator, tone, friendly. Alice hesitated. She was just a minor lady, how could she be so close to a concubine? But when she met Samantha's expectant gaze, Alice swallowed her words.
Alice, tone, friendly, all right.
Narrator, tone, serious. Following Alexander, Edward noticed his master's steps falter slightly, feeling a bit alarmed. Alexander's jaw tightened, his face darkening. Narrator, tone, terrified. Oh no, he must have heard what Sophia said.
Edward, tone, terrified. What did Sophia just say?
Narrator, tone, serious. He didn't come right up to us. No need for that. Narrator, tone, terrified. Edward gasped. Sophia really dared to say anything. Showing such disrespect to the emperor, even in private, was still overheard by him. Narrator, tone, angry. Alexander, barely containing his anger, took a few more steps forward. Hearing the women's conversation fade into the distance, he finally couldn't hold back and coldly ordered.
Alexander, tone, angry, brings Sophia to the Hall of Diligence.
Narrator, tone, terrified. Edward's heart skipped a beat. This was bad. The Hall of Diligence was where court matters were discussed. How could a concubine have the right to go there? Could it be that because of what just happened, the emperor was going to charge Sophia with disrespecting the royal family and deal with her and her family? Wouldn't that mean Sophia would be sent to the cold palace?
Alexander, tone, impatient. Edward?
Narrator, tone, terrified. Seeing no movement, Alexander grew even more irritated, his gaze towards Edward filled with impatience.
Edward, tone, terrified. Yes, Your Majesty.
Narrator, tone, serious. Edward, fearing that Alexander might send him to the cold palace along with Sophia if he displeased him, hurried to the Weiyang Palace. Narrator, tone, relieved at that moment, in a corner of the palace.
Samantha, tone, relieved a chew.
Narrator, tone, curious, unaware that Edward had put her on the list for the cold palace. Samantha rubbed her nose.
Samantha, tone, curious, who was cursing me? Why else would I sneeze on such a sunny day? I bet it was that unpredictable Alexander.
What did you say? Hearing Edward's words, I nearly spat out the tea I had just sipped.
Why would the emperor suddenly summon me? What does he want?
Just now, to show my sincerity in befriending Alice, I had deliberately given away several large boxes of gold powder from the foreign lands that the original owner had collected. Because of this, the original owner's maids had been chattering in my ear for quite some time. Annoyed, I dismissed everyone, wanting to rest. But I never expected Alexander to pull such a stunt. Why is he calling me to the Hall of Virtue? Everyone knows that the Hall of Virtue is where court officials discuss matters. What business does a concubine like me have there? As I neared the Hall of Virtue, I felt my legs go weak. Scared? How could I be scared? It's just a bit of nervousness. The word scared danced in my mind. What on earth does the emperor want? Why put on such a show? Before I could figure it out, I found myself in front of the Hall of Virtue.
Your servant greets your majesty.
Standing under the hall's plaque was Alexander. Edward was startled and immediately knelt.
Your concubine greets your majesty.
I quickly curtsied, snapping back to reality. Thanks to the original owner's powerful family, an edict from both Catherine and Henry had decreed that I need not kneel unless it was a major occasion. Alexander glanced at me and then dismissed Edward. Before leaving, Edward gave me a pitying look. Something's off. Both the Emperor and Edward are acting strange.
You, come with me.
Alexander, displeased by my lack of proper etiquette, coldly commanded and walked into the Hall of Virtue.
Thank you, Your Majesty. Your concubine is coming.
I was curious to see what the Emperor wanted from me. Passing a grand screen depicting a dragon drinking from a stream, I saw a table full of memorials. I glanced at the Emperor's head, noting his thick hair.
Impressive, I thought. Handling so much state business daily and still not going bald, truly a gift of fortune.
Sit.
Alexander said, lifting his robe and sitting at the head of the table. I found the farthest seat from him and sat down. Alexander began reviewing the memorials, ignoring me. I took the opportunity to examine the hall's decor. Feeling tired, my gaze fell on Alexander. Really, calling me here just to ignore me? How rude. As I silently complained, Alexander finally spoke.
When did you become so close with Lily?
Startled by Alexander's sharp gaze, I quickly explained.
Lily is a genuine person. After spending time with her, we naturally became close.
Ha!
Alexander sighed, put down the memorial, and looked away. I exhaled quietly. Phew, that was close.
Do you truly believe Lily is a suitable choice for Empress?
Hearing this, I looked up to find Alexander staring intently at me. This was a tricky question. I had to answer carefully.
Of course. Lily is elegant and graceful.
Unexpectedly, Alexander's face darkened.
Are you so eager to push me to someone else?
You and Lily are true love. I'm just an outsider, feeling awkward and uncomfortable.
I blurted out, seeing Alexander's stormy expression. I stopped talking. What does he want from me? I'm so confused. Even if I talked more, I couldn't figure out his intentions. Sitting here doing nothing wasn't helping either. I felt frustrated but couldn't express it. Since Alexander ignored me, I started drinking the wine nearby.
It tasted pretty good.
By the time he paid attention to me, I was already quite tipsy. Alexander walked over, looking disgusted. He turned to call someone to take me back to my quarters, but I stared at him for a long time, then boldly hugged him, mumbling.
Beautiful, come closer.
His face darkened visibly. He gritted his teeth, pried me off, and pinched my mouth.
Look carefully. Who am I?
So handsome. Lily? No, Lily isn't this aggressive. Isabella? No, too flat-chested. Charlotte? No, the accent is wrong. I know, you're the emperor.
Hearing my comments about his harem and my final address, Alexander was furious. If he had a sword, I wouldn't doubt he'd use it on me.
What did you call me?
He asked, pinching my face.
Emperor, big jerk.
Drunk and fearless, I blurted out my thoughts and even vomited on him, causing chaos in the Hall of Virtue.
Forgive my tardiness, Your Majesty!
He had heard the commotion inside but never imagined it would be such a scene. Sophia clung to Henry's robe like an octopus, her other hand slowly reaching for his firm backside.
Outrageous.
Despite his martial prowess, Alexander hesitated to hurt me. Faced with my shameless behavior, he couldn't bring himself to push me away. My slender fingers landed a crisp slap on Alexander's firm backside. Smack. The palace maids and eunuchs who had entered the hall held their breath. Sophia was indeed formidable.
Sophia, please let go. This is highly inappropriate.
But in my drunken state, I couldn't care less about their murmurs. Feeling the soft and bouncy texture under my hand, I chuckled and squeezed again. Alexander's face turned as red as a beet.
You're quite handsome.
My hand that had just touched his backside now caressed Alexander's handsome face.
Samantha, get off me at once. How dare you be so insolent? I will have you punished, MNPH.
I was causing quite a scene, and no one dared to intervene. My outrageous actions made everyone gasp. What on earth is Sophia doing? This is a grave offense.
This is fun.
You! Insolent! You fools, get her off me!
Yes.
Edward and the others were stunned, only snapping out of it when a young eunuch tugged at his sleeve. But where was Sophia? As Alexander and Edward looked around in confusion, a voice suddenly came from above.
Wow, the view is great from here. Especially that handsome guy.
I had climbed to the top of the rockery in the center of the hall and was now looking down at the crowd, finding it rather dull.
Why are you wearing a yellow robe? Such poor taste. Let me help you pick a better outfit. Handsome, here I come.
Sophia, no!
Edward realized where Samantha was. He was about to send someone to bring her down when she suddenly fell, making his heart skip a beat. Alexander, with his back to the crowd, heard my nonsense and laughed in anger. But hearing Edward's exclamation, he turned around. By then, I was already falling, thinking I was doomed. Damn it. Alexander cursed inwardly, his body reacting faster than his thoughts. He caught me just in time.
You're bad. Why did you take so long to catch me?
I hit his chest with my fists. If I were sober, I'd be disgusted by my own actions. Thud. Alexander never expected to be knocked down by my punch, hitting his head on the ground. He thought Samantha was born to torment him. In a daze, he heard Edward's voice.
Sophia, no! That's the precious porcelain vase from the late emperor.
Alexander realized one thing: he would never let me near alcohol again. Before he could finish his thought, he fainted. I collapsed on top of Alexander, clutching his waist tightly before passing out from the alcohol. Call the physician, was the last thing I heard before losing consciousness. The next day. When I woke up, it was already late morning. Contrary to those novels where the protagonist feels like they've been run over by a truck, I felt no such pain. I guess I didn't do anything too reckless last night. Darn it, fake alcohol is really harmful. After I finished washing up, the heroine was waiting outside, looking at me expectantly. I felt a bit awkward seeing her again. Oh no, I turned out to be the third wheel in their relationship. I'm such a sinner for interfering with the main couple, sob.
Lily, Henry is not here.
Alice's eyes were slightly red as she walked over to me, pulling my hand with a pitiful expression.
Are you all right?
Nothing much, just feeling completely drained.
Alice seemed a bit speechless at my response. I realized my words might have sounded like I was boasting about receiving favor. Heaven knows, I didn't mean it that way. Blame it on that darn emperor for confusing me so much. Alice finally reacted, pulling me to sit down beside her. She glanced at the mark on my ear and muttered,
Henry really doesn't know how to cherish beauty. You've been wronged.
What? Alice, you're acting strange. Shouldn't you be resentful and blame me for breaking up you two? Why are you complaining about the emperor instead?
I wanted to explain that Henry didn't actually do anything to me last night, but her words left me speechless.
Girl, even if you're the heroine, it's not good to openly criticize the emperor's skills, is it? I couldn't help but gossip a little, leaning close to her ear and asking, when you and Henry are close, is he also like this?
Lily, Henry and I, it's not what you think.
Alice's cheeks turned pink, and she hurriedly explained. Hearing this, I felt something was off. No way, has the heroine been favored since entering the palace, and the male lead actually left such a beauty alone? Male lead, you really have issues. Alice lowered her eyes and muttered where I couldn't hear.
What's so good about men? By the way, Lily, I specifically got some ointment from the Imperial Hospital. You hurt your back yesterday. This will help you heal faster.
Alice took out a jar of ointment and placed it in front of me, looking a bit shy. I was deeply moved. The heroine is so considerate. Compared to her, the male lead is really awful.
You're so thoughtful. I pulled her hand to make her sit down, but she shook her head.
Lily, you haven't applied the ointment yet, right? How about I help you with it?
Alice's eyes sparkled, and faced with her kindness, I shamefully gave in. Although the injury was in an awkward spot, we're both girls, so there's no need to be shy. I lay back on the bed, loosened my clothes, and exposed my lower back. The bruise from yesterday had turned dark. Alice lowered her head, looking at the bruise and the finger marks nearby, almost crushing the ointment jar in her hand. As she applied the ointment and gently massaged my back, I closed my eyes in comfort, thinking, what a sweet and considerate heroine. Alexander returned from court in a good mood, his steps lighter than usual. But when he entered the chamber, he saw Alice applying ointment to my back. His face darkened immediately.
What are you doing?
Before Alice and I could react, he had already rushed over, pulling Alice away and throwing her to the ground, then wrapping me in a blanket. You, Emperor, are acting very strange. How can you be so rough and throw the heroine aside like that?
Henry, Alice was just helping me apply ointment. How can you treat her so roughly? If you have something to say to her, just say it. If you find me in the way, I can leave for a while.
I couldn't help but speak up for Alice. As I spoke, I tried to get up to help her, but the Emperor pulled me back, glaring at Alice with anger.
Lily, don't blame Henry. It's my fault for being weak and not standing firm.
Hearing this, I couldn't help but look at Alexander with a reproachful gaze. He had never realized before how cunning Alice could be. When Samantha was the one being targeted, he found Alice's words quite useful. Now, karma had come around, and Alice made him taste the bitterness of having no way to explain himself. So in the end, the fool was him? Alexander, now furious, ordered Alice to be confined for offending him and explicitly forbade me from visiting her. After Alice was taken away, I felt deflated. Once again, it was just the two of us, and an awkward tension hung between us. When I received the imperial decree that Alexander wanted me to accompany him to the palace, I suddenly understood. The court has been unstable lately. To protect Alice, the emperor has gone to great lengths. If only they had told me earlier. I was so nervous, thinking the emperor had taken an interest in me. What a scare. So, I packed some essentials and boarded the carriage to the palace. The carriage swayed, making me dizzy. Perhaps the coachman was slacking off, as the wheels hit a stone, causing me to bump into the corner of the carriage.
Wincing. Ouch.
I winced, the pain in my forehead secondary to the sudden recollection of that drunken night. What a disaster. I quietly lifted the curtain of the carriage, intending to see how many guards were following. To my surprise, I turned and saw Alexander's increasingly stern face. Just looking was fine, but unfortunately, our eyes met.
Nervous.
Serious.
We stared at each other in silence. I slowly raised the corners of my mouth, then realized it was inappropriate. Thinking about that night, what I did was enough for Alexander to punish me severely. My face immediately fell. Not knowing how to respond, I hurriedly lowered the curtain. With a swish, Alexander, not expecting my cold reaction, couldn't help but let out a light snort. He was probably contemplating how to deal with me. However, in the entire kingdom, it seemed I was the only one with such audacity. While Alexander found it novel, he was likely planning my demise, using an attack at the palace as a perfect excuse. This was one of the reasons he brought me along. As my thoughts flowed, the coldness in Alexander's eyes slightly diminished. Outside the carriage, there were short, sharp sounds. Clang! Before I could react, I heard the clash of swords. Then came Edward's voice.
Shouting, "Protect the Emperor!"
I blinked, feeling inexplicably scared. Historically, the main characters always had some protective luck, while the unlucky ones were usually the minor characters. How should I meet my end to leave a lasting impression on the Emperor and not bring harm to my family?
Angry. Alexander, if I can't harm you today, I will still shake the foundation of your kingdom. I've heard that Sophia's father, the Chancellor, holds great influence in court. I wonder how he would react to losing his beloved daughter because of you.
As soon as he finished speaking, the roof of my carriage was torn open. Light poured in from above, making it hard for me to keep my eyes open. Shielding my eyes with my hand, I gasped. I had intended to watch the drama unfold, but now it was happening right above me. After the roof was lifted, a figure jumped onto the side of the carriage.
Excited. The Emperor is indeed fortunate. Sophia is truly beautiful.
Honestly, I wanted to nod. This assassin had good taste.
Cheerful. Tisk. I sighed, noticing the masked man's actions. I know I'm beautiful, but there's no need to hold a knife to my neck.
Alexander, who had just repelled the surrounding attackers and was about to dismount, nearly fell at my words. He paused, pursing his lips. At a time like this foolish woman still had the mind to joke.
Surprised, huh? Such an interesting person. It would be a pity to harm her. How about taking her away for some fun?
I immediately looked at him with pity. Leave. You're dreaming. Villains always talk too much, a timeless truth. Sophia, you might as well comply with me. It's better than being mistreated by that unromantic emperor and suffering in the harem. Besides, I have some connections with the Prime Minister. He said, chuckling as he reached out to touch my cheek. I rolled my eyes in exasperation. How could there be such a foolish character? Alexander intended to rescue me, but he was surrounded by another group of people. There was no movement from the carriage, and in desperation, Alexander shouted in this direction.
If anything happens to Samantha, I will not let you off.
Having just dodged an attack from a masked assailant, I couldn't help but blink at his words. So, Alexander didn't intend to punish me after all? Then why should I be afraid?
Henry, save me!
Then, in front of everyone, I headbutted the masked assailant. With a thud, the intense pain and dizziness caused the masked man to faint on the spot. Immediately, everyone stopped fighting and looked in my direction, falling into a dead silence. Being stared at by so many eyes, I couldn't help but cover my face in embarrassment. How annoying. For a moment, everyone's expressions twisted, followed by even fiercer fighting. Taking advantage of their distraction, I tied up the unconscious masked man. Perhaps because I had been too fierce earlier, no assassins approached the carriage during this process. Although the emperor was somewhat despicable, he had been well prepared. The men in black were no match and were quickly subdued. I looked up to see Alexander standing before me, holding a blood-stained sword, his expression somewhat grim.
Then, he swung his sword towards me.
Ah, the emperor is going to kill me. What happened to not killing me? This is so unfair.
Thud.
It was the sound of a sword entering a body. Am I dead? No wonder I can't feel any pain.
Does it hurt?
It was Alexander's voice, followed by a gentle touch on my forehead. I peeked open one eye to see Alexander standing in front of me, gently stroking my forehead. Oh, it wasn't me who died, it was that talkative villain. I opened my eyes fully and looked at the lifeless body on the ground, then fearfully threw myself into the emperor's arms.
Oh no, this person's fate was too terrifying, I'll have nightmares.
Why did you come so late?
Hearing this, Alexander slightly furrowed his brows, withdrew his right hand, and pulled out the sword from the masked man's back.
I'm sorry for making you suffer with me.
Henry, seeing him so disheveled, I felt a twinge of pity.
Alexander, who had been looking at the masked man's body, slowly raised his head to look at me. He opened his mouth to say something but unexpectedly collapsed towards me. Standing in the corner of the carriage, I, a weak woman with shaky legs, couldn't possibly bear such weight. So, without any resistance, I fell down with Alexander pressing on me. With a loud thud, the back of my head hit the ground again. I distinctly felt something soft touch my lips. Moreover, I could smell the scent of camellias on it. Camellias. Thinking this, my vision went black, and I completely lost consciousness. Damn, I let my guard down and didn't dodge.
Maid, tone. Excited, she's awake. Sophia is finally awake.
I had just opened my eyes when I heard a maid speaking beside me.
Sophia, tone, confused, where is this place?
Looking at the unfamiliar surroundings, I frowned slightly. The place was decorated quite elegantly, with a predominant purple theme complemented by pink and white, creating a perfect balance. However, the room seemed a bit sparse, indicating it wasn't a sleeping chamber.
Sophia, this is Apricot Grove, the residence of an old friend of Henry.
Sophia, tone, relieved, oh, I see.
But then I remembered, I hadn't seen Henry yet. I recalled that before I lost consciousness, Alexander had also fainted. I wondered how he was doing now. Considering that Alexander might be injured, I decided to go check on him out of both concern and obligation. So, I had the maid help me to where Alexander was. Looking at the handsome man lying on the bed, I couldn't help but sigh. How unlucky could we be to encounter assassins today?
Fetch a basin of warm water and some towels.
Yes.
After they left, I sat quietly beside Alexander, examining him. The more I looked, the more I felt that he truly deserved to be the male lead. Even in his sleep, his appearance was captivating. As I continued to look, my hands began to itch. What should I do? I wanted to touch him. His skin looked so smooth, it must feel nice to pinch. Unconsciously, I moved closer to Alexander, close enough to see the fine hairs on his face and catch a faint scent of camellia. Wait. Camellia scent? Realizing something, I looked at Alexander's lips in disbelief. No way. Could it be what I think it is? Did we accidentally kiss when we fell off the carriage? No, I don't believe it. But, no concubine in the entire palace uses camellia powder. I once heard Edward mention that Alexander uses a special camellia-based powder to protect his face from the sun when he goes out. So, I quickly covered my mouth with my hand and gasped. Did I just lose my first kiss like that? Just as I was about to pull away, Alexander slowly opened his eyes, and our gazes met. He stared at me silently, making me wonder if he had injured his brain. After all, a normal emperor wouldn't look at me with such deep, unwavering eyes. Blushing, my eyes accidentally drifted to his lips again. Remembering the accidental kiss before we fainted, I felt both embarrassed and flustered.
Sophia, tone, flustered, what are you looking at? Am I that good looking?
Unexpectedly, my careless words seemed to amuse Alexander.
Alexander, tone, amused, I know I'm handsome, but there's no need to hold a knife to my throat.
Ugh, what an awkward moment. Alexander's teasing gaze made me uneasy. You're too much, taking all the bamboo shoots from the mountain. The pandas must be starving because of you. Why didn't I notice this mischievous side of him before?
Sophia, tone, pretending to whimper, you're mocking me.
Hearing Emily's whimpering, Alexander covered his mouth and coughed lightly.
Show some respect, I am the emperor.
The emperor? Even if you're the emperor, you couldn't have foreseen the assassination attempt. It scared me half to death. Humph.
I thought Alexander would argue back, but to my surprise, he fell silent, his expression growing somber.
The son of the late King Pingqiang holds a grudge against me. This time, he colluded with the imperial guards, which is why you suffered. It's my fault.
Is your wound serious?
It's nothing, coughs a few more times.
Oh.
After all, Alexander got injured saving me. I felt a bit guilty. I thought Alexander would go rest since he was unwell and needed to recuperate. But unexpectedly, his gentle voice came again.
As long as you're safe, that's all that matters.
The air was quiet, and his words left me stunned. Alexander, such a gentle person. But wait, isn't this line supposed to be said to the female lead? I suddenly panicked, thinking about his recent attitude towards Alice. A terrible suspicion formed in my mind.
No way.
I slowly raised my head, ignoring the slight flutter in my heart.
Ahem, I'm not feeling well. You should go rest. Have Edward come here, coughing up blood before he could finish.
He glanced at me once and then fainted. Seeing Alexander like this, I grew even more anxious.
Alexander, wake up, don't scare me.
You're the male lead, you should be fine, right? As I called out, memories of my interactions with Alexander flashed through my mind. Meeting by the small pond in the imperial garden, refusing to share a bed in the palace, reluctantly sitting beside him at Catherine's birthday banquet, discussing music by the lake at dusk, causing a scene while drunk in his hall, and him saving me from assassins. All these moments filled me with an inexplicable emotion. I realized Alexander was no longer just a character in a novel. Both he and Alice were real, flesh and blood people. I hadn't sorted out my feelings for Alexander, but I was worried about his injuries. Just then, the sound of hurried footsteps reached my ears, making me even more anxious. Edward arrived with the imperial physicians, looking increasingly concerned at the scene.
Sophia, please wait in the outer hall.
As two maids gently pulled me away. Though I was reluctant to leave, I knew I couldn't help and eventually left with tears in my eyes.
Poor thing, I thought. I hope he recovers soon.
Alexander remained unconscious for 5 days. During this time, I learned why his injuries were so severe. The masked man in black had a close associate nearby, carrying a highly toxic substance. If Alexander hadn't come to save me, the poison wouldn't have entered his wounds, causing them to fester and preventing him from waking up. I wouldn't have known any of this if Edward hadn't surrounded Alexander with his men. One late night, when the guards were changing shifts, I sneaked in. The royal physician was changing Alexander's bandages, and I saw the state of his wounds. The sight of the exposed bone and decaying flesh was horrifying. All of this was because of me. Although I always considered myself an outsider, I couldn't remain indifferent. He had suffered such severe injuries to save me, yet he never mentioned it. But after crossing over, I had been suspicious and guarded against him due to preconceived memories. I couldn't hold back anymore. At first, I cried softly, but soon I was sobbing uncontrollably beside Alexander. From then on, I took care of Alexander day and night, but even as I watched his sleeping face, I couldn't feel happy. On the 5th night of Alexander's coma, I wiped the sweat from his forehead, placed the cloth aside, washed my hands, and sat back down beside him. Seeing him still unconscious, I couldn't help but mutter, "Alexander, you're the protagonist, you'll be fine, right? And your heroine, Alice, is still waiting for you in the palace to make her your queen." As I finished speaking, I felt a slight pang in my heart. Just as I finished, within 3 breaths, I got a response.
What are you talking about?
Startled and overjoyed, I looked at Alexander. He had woken up.
"Henry, you're finally awake."
Alexander smiled faintly, his face regaining some color, though his lips were still dry.
Yes, but what do you mean by protagonist and heroine? He asked, slowly grasping my hand.
"Henry, you must still be affected by the poison. You're hallucinating. I'll call the royal physician."
I tried to leave, but Alexander grabbed me. In a swift motion, he pinned me down on the bed.
"Oh no, this is bad."
Samantha, let me make this clear, I don't like Alice. And I don't like you thinking I do.
Huh?
I was stunned, looking up at him. "Ha, sweet-talking man, do you think I'll believe you?" Despite my thoughts, my face flushed, and my body reacted honestly, showing my happiness.
You. I had countless questions but didn't know where to start.
Why are you so silly? Alexander chuckled, his tone filled with affection.
Ah, this man is dangerously sweet.
Wait. Did he just call me silly? I can't let that slide. Who's silly? Don't think you can, you.
I met his gaze, and my tongue started to tie itself in knots.
I'm not silly. You're the one who recklessly rushed over without thinking.
Alexander responded with a soft hum, his voice full of indulgence. As our eyes met, countless emotions brewed between us. Feeling short of breath, I pinched Alexander's arm, prompting him to slowly release his hold on me. After the kiss ended, I was half lying in Alexander's arms. I tried to get up, worried about his wounds.
It's fine.
Lying in his arms, I couldn't help but smile. This is wonderful. Narrator, tone, serious Alexander, known by some unflattering nicknames, reminisces about his rise to power and the people around him.
Alexander, tone, serious. I was designated as the crown prince from a young age, the hope of the great Yin kingdom. Besides learning various knowledge and etiquette, I had to master the art of manipulation. Even my mother wasn't entirely devoted to me. Her primary concern was the glory of our lineage and her own wealth and status.
Narrator, tone, serious. Under the constraints of numerous palace rules, Alexander grew into the current Emperor Qi. His position, however, remained unstable.
Alexander, tone, serious. My mother, now the empress dowager, appointed many concubines for me, including Sophia from the Su family. Initially, I didn't like her much, thinking she was just like my mother, scheming for her family.
Narrator, tone, serious. Alexander didn't want Sophia to bear his child, so he avoided her. The empress dowager scolded him, but he remained indifferent.
Alexander, tone, serious. The other concubines were no smarter, their eyes filled with calculation. Thus, everyone in the palace knew that I had never truly favored anyone.
Narrator, tone, serious. Things began to change one night when Alexander, feeling restless, decided to take a walk in the imperial garden. He overheard an argument between Sophia and the exceptionally beautiful Alice.
Alexander, tone, friendly. I initially had a good impression of Alice, mainly because she had no prominent family background and seemed genuinely innocent.
Narrator, tone, serious. Sophia's actions that night surprised Alexander, making him question his initial judgment of her.
Alexander, tone, serious. Could it be that she wasn't as malicious as I had thought?
Narrator, tone, serious. With doubts in his mind, Alexander tested Sophia by suggesting she spend the night with him. To his surprise, she refused and even recommended Alice as the empress.
Alexander, tone, confused. At the empress dowager's banquet, I felt that Sophia seemed to disdain me. Worse, I felt a bit betrayed.
Narrator, tone, serious. Sophia's personality change made Alexander realize she was no longer the person he once knew. Yet, he didn't expose her.
Alexander, tone, hopeful. Recently, Sophia had become more vibrant, always capturing my attention.
Narrator, tone, serious. Eventually, Alexander sent Edward to bring Sophia to the Changqian Hall. Unexpectedly, she got drunk and threw a tantrum on him.
Alexander, tone, angry. At that moment, I wanted to tear her apart. As the Emperor of Yin, I had never been so humiliated.
Narrator, tone, cheerful. But later, seeing her asleep, Alexander felt both helpless and amused. This unpredictability brightened his life.
Alexander, tone, hopeful. It made my life more than just balancing power, stabilizing hearts, and securing the throne.
Narrator, tone, serious. Alexander didn't intend to rush things, believing that everything would naturally fall into place.
Alexander, tone, sad. But I never expected to be attacked soon after. Seeing Sophia cornered in the carriage by the son of the Pingqiang king, my heart ached.
Narrator, tone, serious. After eliminating the attackers, Alexander felt heartbroken and angry at himself for not speaking up sooner.
Alexander, tone, determined. I vowed never to let Sophia suffer again.
Narrator, tone, serious. Despite losing some flesh in the attack, Alexander gained something. Holding Sophia under the sun, he thought about her desire for a lifelong, exclusive relationship.
Alexander, tone, serious. My Sophia shouldn't suffer. So, before the coronation, I secretly contacted many court officials, using both power and reason to convince them to agree to disperse the harem.
Narrator, tone, serious. Alexander personally arranged the fate of one concubine, Alice, sending her to the harsh northwest and forbidding her from returning to the capital without an edict.
Alexander, tone, hopeful that day, hearing her say she was willing, I felt like giving her my heart.
Narrator, tone, cheerful because, Sophia, no treasure in the world can express my feelings for you.
Alexander, tone, cheerful oh, and I would never admit that I dispersed the harem because I disliked Alice and others monopolizing her. Let everything be carried away by the wind.